So you need to complete a drawing that has foreground, middle ground, and background. So this is here, near, far, and I have that on the board. This right here is an illustration using some words and a few lines that show background is further away, middle ground is, you know, a medium size, and then foreground is right in front, like what's right there in front of you, standing out. So some of these sketches, which is what you're going to be working on for homework, have more depth or background than others. When the colors were applied to these objects, they stood out more. You do not need to shade yours, but this student wanted to illustrate that. And so they ended up overlapping some of these in the actual bigger sketch that gave a little bit more of that background space. Here are two illustrations because two sketches were assigned, and they're vertical versus the horizontal that you just saw. And you can see that this is the horizon line. That just gives, this is background. This would be middle ground, and then these crumpled up tissues or whatnot, paper, are like right in the front. So you can see that. So this is sitting on water, and so the water is kind of coming out in front. This is more middle, and the sky is background. And then there's some depth within this kind of clear glass container. This one, they ended up not having a lot of depth, and so when we talked about just putting a horizon line in, that kind of sets this on the ground here. And yes, there are clouds that are up front as well. They didn't have this here. They had the sun with this around it, but we talked about how can we actually overlap some more, and they talked about like a plant or like a sunflower but becoming the sun, and so it added a little bit more visual interest to the piece and some depth. So this tea kettle is pouring out kind of rain from the clouds, and then there's a little scene with the sun and water and everything in this little clear tea glass. So these are just some 7th grade examples of what we'll be kind of focusing on today. Mountains, and you can see they're overlapping. The light clouds are weaving in between the mountains. Birds are bigger, and then medium, and then small, which shows distance or background, middle ground, foreground. And then there's just a little figure that's sitting on the clouds. And you can see a lot of them had that border. So when you go to start today on your worksheet or your piece of paper, so if you just take a white piece of paper and fold it in half, and all you need to do is make sure that you start with a frame. Very much like our clay where we did that parallel line around the piece. This is kind of what we're trying to do. So your image will either go horizontal here or vertical. And you want to think sometimes in thirds. So if I was going to have background, middle ground, foreground, and you think about it as layers, then that's going to help you. It might be more like right here. So if I was going to do some mountains here, and then maybe something else right, you know, in this space that was more three-dimensional, and then maybe I have something that's kind of growing like in front of that. I don't know what I would end up wanting for my illustration, but you can see that there's some depth in the piece. Okay, and I was just using rectangles and lines and shapes and triangles to show you that. This is a worksheet that I have for you today, and so you can do your one illustration here. 2 was on the board, but I'm going to assign you 1. If you want to do more, then fold your paper in half and do what I did on the back. But I have some hash marks just to remind you in thirds, and then also I want you to complete do your best to answer these questions without looking the information up. So it's like a pre-assessment, but I just want to know, since we're going to be talking about color in a couple of days, this is what you are pulling from memory. And so it just gives me some prior knowledge. So those sketches are due in a couple of